Okay, hi guys, and welcome to Dermatology 101. This is hosted by Teen Health 101, and if this is your first time at a Teen Health 101 event, welcome. And if you guys have already been to one of them, welcome back. So the schedule for today is going to look something like I'm going to give a few opening remarks, and then we're going to have our speaker, Dr. Bonati, and then we're going to have a short question and answer session at the end. If you guys have any questions about the presentation in general, please wait until our Q&A session to ask. If you do, just leave them in the chat beforehand. They're gonna be answered at the end. And just a general tip, try to ask questions that are regarding things that haven't been mentioned in the presentation, just to save time and ensure everything runs smoothly. About us, my name is Simran Narula. I'm going to be hosting the event. I'm a project and events manager for Teen Health 101, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I love helping others, and I'm super interested in the medical field, which is why I joined Teen Health 101.
Hi guys, I'm Rafia. I'm going to be your moderator for today, and I'm the director of projects and events here at Teen Health 101. I'm actually from Toronto, Canada, and I'm passionate about making educational resources more accessible to teens. It's kind of why I joined Teen Health 101.
Okay, so a little bit about Teen Health 101. It's a youth-led nonprofit platform that basically focuses on creating multimedia and reliable resources about a bunch of different topics like health, fitness, and science to educate and inform the youth like me and you. So our mission is to really combat the spread of misinformation that's found a lot through social media and stuff like that, and be a platform so people can find simple and accurate information about all things health related. And that's kind of what our goal is here. We have a website, teenhealth101.org. If you want to check it out, you guys can scan the barcode. I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that if you're interested. And then we also have an Instagram, which is at teenhealth101, another QR code if you guys want to check it out. Okay, so our team consists of ambassadors and content creators, and our ambassadors basically promote the event. They're like the general club members, so they like promote the event in different platforms and stuff like that, and they work together to like ensure that our resources and stuff are like spread through to different people. And then the content creators like me and Rafia are in charge of promoting creating the projects, the events, the articles, and the actual resources that go on our website and on our social media and stuff like that. Our team has about 400, over 400 student staff, and we're spread around through 17 different countries. So we're pretty widespread, and we've grown a lot over the last few months. And if you guys are interested in joining us, go ahead and fill out the applications. The QR codes for the ambassadors and content creators are also on the slides. Okay, and just more content if you guys are interested in Teen Health 101. One more QR code. And with that, I hope you guys enjoy the event. And Dr. Bonati, the floor is all yours.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Bonati. I am a dermatologist, so a skin doctor. I work in Vail, Colorado. Yes, that's the ski resort town. But I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. And my Instagram is up there if you want to follow or ask me any questions. Yep, there you go. My pronoun is she and her. And I'm going to talk to everyone a little bit about how one becomes a doctor. Now, I know that teen health encompasses 17 countries, so it's going to be a little bit different depending on where you live. But if you are in the United States, or if you are applying to become a physician in the United States, that's what I'm going to go through here. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So becoming a doctor is a long road. Everyone kind of knows that. There's no joke about that. It's 12 years at a minimum to become a physician, and that's minimum. So if you look at these bullet points, it starts with undergrad or college. So you need 4 years of college, and you can major or focus your studies on anything you want during that time. However, there are certain courses in science and math that you'll have to take in addition to be eligible to start medical school. So after you finish 4 years of undergraduate, then you do 4 years of medical school, you do 1 year of internship, 3 to 4 years of residency, and 1 to 3 years of fellowship, depending on which specialty you go into. And in the next slides, I'm going to tell you what all of those different stages mean, because it can be very confusing and hard to interpret. So we'll go on to the next slide. So 4 years of undergrad, as I said, you can study anything you want, but you do have to take certain science and math courses. For example, when I was in college, I studied music. I loved music theory and composition. I was a classical piano player and a vocalist. So that was my focus in college. That's what I loved to do. But I also knew that I wanted to go into medicine and become a doctor. So I had to take science and math courses on top of my normal courses for my music major. So going to the next section, 4 years of medical school. So during medical school, you're a little bit more focused, a little bit more structured. Everyone takes the same classes, and you also work in the hospital. So your time in med school is split. The first 2 years are more classroom based, where you're learning all the basics about physiology, illness, different body systems, all the science behind the human body. It's fascinating. Then you get to take all that information that you learned in the classroom and you transition into actually working in the hospital. And you're not on your own, you're not taking care of patients by yourself, you have plenty of supervision, but that's the time period where you start to explore the different fields within medicine and get a sense of what fits your personality, what is of interest to you, how you want to spend your days, and you get to rotate through all the different specialties. So pediatrics, OBGYN, neurology, surgery, all the different things that you might be interested in. At the end of your 4 years of medical school, that's when you get your MD, right? So that's when you become a medical doctor, you have your degree, and you are technically allowed to practice in the United States. Now, most people do not stop there because no one would hire you if you didn't have further training in the hospital. So that goes on to our 1 year internship, and we can go to the next slide. And that's where you're actually working in the hospital. So you get a paycheck. You are actually on staff at a hospital where you're part of a team. So again, you're not alone taking care of patients, but you're part of a team of young people who are all in training. And there's kind of a hierarchy that goes through it. So you have one physician at the top with lots of experience to make sure nothing goes wrong. And then you have different levels of residents or MDs who have gone through certain amounts of training, and you all kind of work together to take care of patients. And you learn from all the people that are above you how to do it all. That internship is often done either in surgery or internal medicine. And that's kind of a splitting point that a lot of medical students go through when they decide, well, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do, but I know I want to do surgery. Or I'm not sure what I want to do, but I know I don't want to do surgery and I want to be more of a medical doctor in the hospital or in the community. So there's a little bit of a split point at that time period. Then you move on to your residency training, and this is where you are training solely in your chosen field. So for me, I went into dermatology, which means that my internship was a medical internship. And then I did 3 years of dermatology training where we work in clinics and in the hospital, learning all the things that we need to learn to be a good dermatologist. At the end of that training period, you take your board exam. When you take your boards, it's basically the end of all your training, the accumulation of everything you've worked towards, and you've passed them, and now you are what's called a board certified physician in whatever specialty you went into. And it's at this point where someone would want to hire you. So at least in the United States, for the most part, you have to be a board certified physician to start working and taking care of patients. If you want to further specialize, you can do what's called a fellowship. Fellowships help you kind of narrow in your focus on something really, really specific. So in my case, for example, I did dermatology residency, And then I decided I wanted to spend an extra year specializing in something called Mohs surgery. It's a specialized way of removing skin cancers from the head and the neck part of the body. So I did a lot of surgical training in that fellowship year, which allowed me to, in my current practice, to really be able to take care of those patients and perform those procedures safely and effectively. Now, doing a fellowship is not required, but it's something that you can consider. It's optional. Okay. So going on to the next slide. So these are some common questions that one might be thinking about if they're considering going to med school. So the first question you see is, how is the transition from college to med school? So when I think about my experience, in college, it's more about exploring, figuring out what it is that's of interest to you, what kind of things get you excited, how do you envision your next 5-10 years down the road? What do you think is interesting? And it can be as varied as, for me, studying music, you may like political science, you might like business. There's everything. And the beauty of going to college is that you can kind of dip your toe in all these different pools and there's no commitment. You can just learn for the sake of learning. And it makes you a better person overall in the end. College is about extracurriculars. You're still doing all the fun things that maybe you love to do in high school, whether it's sports or music or drama or pottery or whatever, or debate team, whatever it is that you might be interested in, you can still do all those extracurriculars at college. So that's a fun thing. And then of course, social, right? College is all about, partying and social life and having a great time. So everything is kind of mixed together. You're just exploring, figuring out what is a good fit for you. Once you get to med school, things change. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of time to do the extracurriculars that maybe you love to do in high school and college, because you're focused really on your classes, your hospital work, and studying. Everyone in your med school class is working towards the same goal. So we're all taking classes together. There's a lot of collaboration, but there's also a lot of competition because everyone wants to do well and score high on their exams. There's a lot of testing in med school. So after you finish each class, there's a test. So it's a way to consolidate an enormous amount of material and information into a couple years. So where college is more about exploring, finding out what is a good fit for you, med school is when you have already decided, okay, I'm going to be a doctor and now I'm going to focus in and I'm going to really put my head to the grindstone and do what it takes to learn as much as I can. So that's the main difference, or that's how I experienced the difference between the two. The next question that people ask is, what does a day look like for you? So I just finished work. I just got home from my clinic. In dermatology, there are lots of appointments. So they're short, quick visits. I take care of medical skin problems like rashes, acne, warts, autoimmune diseases. I do a lot of skin cancer surgery. As I told you before, that's where I got my fellowship or my specialization training. So I do a lot of surgeries. I also do a lot of cosmetic work. And I work in an office setting. So that's an outpatient setting, just a clinic or a doctor's office in my community. I have several medical assistants and nurses who I work with that help support all the patient care that we're doing. And I also work with one other dermatologist. So we are in what's called a private practice. And there are other settings that doctors work in. For example, you could work in a hospital or a university setting. You could work in a private practice of just physicians of your type, like where I work is just dermatologists. But there are also multi-specialty places where people can work, where there are doctors of all different kinds. So maybe you have a family medicine doctor, a pediatrician, a dermatologist, an orthopedist, there's all kinds of different doctors. So my day is pretty great. I love dermatology. One of the best things about it is that, going on to that third question, what do I like about my job? It's full of variety. I love that every patient that walks into my office has something new for me to learn, something new to diagnose. What's nice about dermatology is that I don't need a lot of testing. I don't need to do x-rays and tons of blood work. For dermatology, it's very visual. Everything we do is what we see. So we learn about pattern recognition, learning about the way that the skin presents itself can teach you a lot about what's going on inside the body. So it's full of variety. There are a lot of treatable conditions. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of different skin conditions that you can actually heal, that you can make 100% better. And you can't say that of a lot of things in medicine. So for example, someone who has high blood pressure or diabetes, that's going to be a lifelong condition that that patient's going to have to manage and deal with for their life. Whereas in dermatology, oftentimes patients will come in, for example, with acne, talking to teens. So I'm sure everyone has experienced a pimple here or there. Now and again, we all have. I still get pimples every now and again. And that's something that we can actually cure. It's something we can fix and we can wrap it up and be done. So that's a really nice thing about derm. It's very satisfying. The other thing I love about derm is that there's a lot of specialization. So for me, like I said before, I specialize in procedures. So things like skin cancer surgery. Other dermatologists may focus on pediatrics, namely skin disease in children. Other dermatologists focus on very complex medical patients who have autoimmune diseases and other kinds of things that are affecting them on the inside and out, in addition to the skin. So there are different ways to specialize within each field, and that's true of every field. So for example, if you went into cardiology, which is a doctor for the heart, a cardiologist could maybe further specialize into transplant cardiology or pediatric cardiology or surgical cardiology. There's a lot of different variety within each field. So I think that's something that's very cool about medicine in general, and that we find in dermatology a lot. Something else to consider when you're thinking about what you want to do is, how do you want to spend your days and your weekends? Dermatology doesn't have a lot of emergencies, which is kind of nice, meaning that I don't have to field phone calls from patients at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to go into the emergency room to see people because they're having life-threatening skin conditions. It's very rare for that to happen. For me, I knew I wanted to have a family. I want to be a mom. I have 2 kids now. And I love spending time with my family. And while I love my job and going to work, I also love coming home and being able to kind of turn off for the day and focus on spending time with friends and family, doing activities and other things that I love. There are certain jobs in medicine that are not like that. For example, a brain surgeon is working 1,000,000 hours a day. They have to work on weekends. They have to work on holidays. You know, and thank goodness we have people who are committed to doing that. For me, it was more important that I be able to have a work-life balance. So that's something that you have to think about as well. Now, that said, during medical school, that work-life balance can be pretty disrupted because you're studying and you're working in the hospital a ton. So for a short period of time, for about, 5 or 10 years, you're really hammering out those hours. And there were many holidays and many weekends that I was in the hospital working, learning, studying, treating patients. But it was all for the larger goal for me of finishing up my training so that once I was in full practice as a working adult doctor, that I did have that work-life balance. So that's something to consider, something to think about. There's no right or wrong answer in terms of what you want to do or what your priorities are. You just have to figure out what's right for you. I want to make a point about the last thing I said on what I enjoy about my job. And I want to talk about relationships. Medicine is fascinating. The science is fascinating. Procedures are fun. But at the end of the day, it's really about the relationships that you form, the friendships that you form, and that doctor-patient trust that is actually the most satisfying thing about my day. So I have repeat patients and I see full families, grandmas, grandkids, and everyone in between. And what's so nice about medicine is you really get to know a family and a person really in depth, and you understand who they are, you understand their soul, and you're able to help them sure, with their medical conditions, in my case, with their skin conditions, but to be able um, to have that special relationship where they trust you with your care, that you can really care for them, contribute so much to society, making you feel that that long 12 years of training was totally worth it. Even the most complicated surgery can get boring after a while once you perfect it. So you then have to think, well, what is it that makes my job fun, that makes me coming back day after day? And when I think about that personally, it's really about the people. It's about the people in your life and the relationships that you forge with your patients and with your staff. So the people that you work with every day. And I think that's true probably of every industry, not just medicine. I think that's probably true in business, in teaching, in all the different fields that you could imagine. Having great coworkers and having great clients or patients, whoever you work with, is just so important. When you're a doctor, you do a lot of listening, you do a lot of healing beyond just the physical body. You do a lot of healing for people mentally and emotionally because you are a trusted caregiver. This is somewhere where people can come. They know that we have their best interest in mind. They know that we're going to go the extra step to make sure that they're healthy and safe. And that goes a long way. So to me, that is actually the most rewarding part of being a doctor. And I think if you talk to any doctor in any field, they would probably end up saying the same thing. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background because my story is a little bit non-traditional. And I think that's important for everyone to recognize that there's no one size fits all in terms of how you get to where you get. So maybe in the end, me and my colleagues and my friends are doctors, but we all kind of got there and approached it a little bit of a different way. So I don't want you to think that you have to, with that 12-year time frame, get started right away and this is it and there's no turning back. It's not like that. You can explore things and do things in a non-conventional way. So I just wanted to highlight my story. So to give you an example. So when I was in high school, I loved science and biology. I was always a bit of a science nerd. I came from a medical family. My father is a doctor. He's a radiologist, not a dermatologist. My mom is a physical therapist. I have dentists and nurses and pharmaceutical company reps all in my family. So at the dinner table, we were always talking about medical stuff. So it felt very familiar. It felt very comfortable to me to pursue medicine. The other thing that I wanted job security, which medicine provides. Everyone always needs a doctor. So job security, meaning that you're not going to lose your job right away. Autonomy, doctors have a lot of autonomy, meaning that we really run our own show. So no one can tell me how to practice. No one can tell me what I can and cannot do for my patients. I really dictate my care. I want it to be challenged on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to be bored with what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm kind of a brainy nerd in the science realm. So I always wanted something that was going to be interesting and challenging, always learning, always growing. And of course, the chance to help people. So it's great to come home and feel like you did a good thing today. You know, when I come home and I know that I've cured 8 or 9 skin cancers, that's a great feeling. So when I started college, I was pre-med, right? And there's a track for pre-med where they tell you have to take biology, physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, calculus. So I started pursuing all of those courses. But then I decided I wanted to pursue music. So going back to that statement where I said it's all about exploring yourself and exploring the things you like, at that time in my life, I was very interested in music, and I wanted to pursue that with a little bit more force than I would have been able to if I was also doing pre-med. When you're doing that pre-med, all those science courses, it is very time consuming because you have to do laboratories where you go in and you tinker around in the lab with science experiments. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of studying. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to pursue music for now, knowing that I can always go back to those courses later and pursue medicine at a later date. So going to the next slide. I finished college. I worked actually in San Francisco for the San Francisco Opera Company and a small jazz orchestra for a while. But after about 2 years, I decided, you know what, this is great, but it's not for me. I want to keep music in my life, but I don't want it to be my career. I do want to go back to medicine. So I enrolled in a 1-year post-bac program. Post-bac programs are made for people like me who decided at a later date after graduating college that they indeed wanted to pursue medicine and therefore have to take all of those science courses in order to get into med school. So I spent 1 year at a program in Philadelphia where they basically specialize in teaching you all of those courses. So it was a hard year, but I will tell you some of my best girlfriends, gosh, 12 years later, were from that 1-year program. So it was a wonderful experience. It was a hard year, but we got it done. Then I took the MCAT, which is the entrance exam for medical school that everyone has to take. And then luckily, I spent the next year being a ski bum in Vail, Colorado, which is where I live now. Kind of funny how I came full circle, while I was applying to medical school. So I knew that I wanted to go to medical school, but I wanted to have a fun year after taking all those science courses and before hitting the library for the next 10 years of medical school and training. Let's go to the next slide. So over the next 9 years, I did do my 4 years of med school, and I enrolled at the University of Miami in Florida. I also completed my internship at Miami, at the University of Miami. And then I did 3 years of dermatology specialty training at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And then I chose to do a 1-year surgical fellowship at a practice in Boston. So you can see that I kind of was all over the place. And that is what happens when you go into medicine, is that you end up going to different cities and different places, depending on where you're accepted into schools and programs. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to say, was it worth it? Yes, it was absolutely worth it. Over those 10 years, though it was long, they offered me so much. And it was largely in my 20s that I did all of this stuff. But if I look at what I accomplished, there is something really special about where this journey has taken me. So I learned a lifelong skill, a lifelong language of medicine that I feel very proud of and that no one can take away, right? That is a skill that you, if you pursue medicine, will have for the rest of your life. You will always have a job. You will always have something to offer. I built lifelong friendships. My girlfriends from med school, which was, gosh, 13 years ago. I just had a med school girlfriend come out and visit me last week. So I still have wonderful friendships. I got to live in so many cool parts of the country, all the way up and down the East Coast, in my case, all the way from Boston down to Miami. And in the meantime, I lived my life, right? I met my husband, I got married, and we had 2 kids. So, you know, you still are living your life, even though you're very focused on this long-term goal. I told you before, I love going to work every day. I don't think a lot of people can say that. I think most people consider their work just a job, just something that pays the bills. For me, I don't know that I would go so far as say it's my calling, but I love going to work each day. Like I said, it's all about those relationships. I love my patients. I love the coworkers, my staff that I work with. It's fun. It's fun going to work. Some of the stuff that I see is what we call bread and butter, meaning kind of just standard stuff that you see every day. And then every so often someone walks in with a complicated or challenging case that kind of brings you back to your training days where you bust out your textbooks and you're kind of reading up on things. But at the end of the day, I feel really satisfied that I have done a good thing for people. I've challenged myself, and I also get a nice work-life balance where I can enjoy my family and continue living life outside of medicine too. So it was definitely worth it, although a long road. It was definitely worth it in my case, but you have to know that it's a long road. So going to the next slide. My final remarks about medicine is for anyone out there who is thinking about a career in medicine, and not just being a doctor, but being a nurse, being a physician assistant, being a medical assistant, anything in the medical field. I think a really helpful exercise is to think about, where do you want to be in 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years? That kind of lines up a nice long window for you to establish realistic goals and when you can achieve them. So if you're a teen and you're in high school right now, maybe your 1 year goal is to graduate high school. I mean, that's step number one, right? Don't be thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go through all these years of training to be a doctor. That is so far down the road. Focus on what you're doing right now and do it well. Don't worry about what's happening down the road, because things are going to change also. So a 1 year goal might be finishing high school. A 5 year goal might be finishing college and deciding what it is that you think you might want to do with your life and your career, whether it be medicine or something else. And then in 10 years, that's kind of more of a big picture thing. Do you want to have a family? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to live down the street from your best friend? Whatever it is, write it down and you steadily work towards those goals one step at a time. One of the most important things that I have learned is your goals are going to change and you're not married to them. So you have to always be reevaluating those goals. So let's say your goal in 5 years was to graduate college and finish all of your science courses so you can go to med school. Maybe halfway through college, you say, you know what? This isn't right for me. It's not a good fit. And maybe I want to explore music like I did, or maybe I want to explore becoming a history professor or whatever it is. That's okay. Shift your goals, shift your focus to whatever is the next thing down the road. You don't want to get caught up or get stuck hanging on to a goal that's no longer relevant for you. And then my last comment is, this is a quote that a good friend of mine actually from medical school told me. She was a D1 volleyball player, and her coach used to always tell her, don't look left and don't look right, because you're going to lose sight of where you're going. And the reason I love that quote is because as you travel down this road of figuring out what you want to do with your career, and if it's healthcare related, it is a long road and there's a lot of competition, and you'll see people doing other things that may make you feel good about what you're doing. They make you feel bad about what you're doing. Don't worry about all the noise that's happening out here. You have to be true to yourself. You have to know what's important to you. And when you look back at those goals and revise them all the time, those become more clear. But if you're focused on what the person next to you is doing, what grade they got on their exam, who they're dating, how much money they have, whatever it is, you're going to lose track of where you need to be. So you should follow your own path and just don't worry about what's going on the outside. And that's been a mantra that, even though I am, 9 years out of med school, I still think about that. And there are times when I still feel a little insecure or a little inadequate because maybe a colleague of mine is doing something that seems more prestigious or more successful than what I'm doing. And you always have to remember that you are on your own path and don't worry about what anyone else is doing. So that's my final comment. I welcome all of your questions. I'm thrilled to be here. I think it's super cool what these girls have put together. Really, really awesome nonprofit. This is exactly what we need. And I wish I was young when this was happening. This would have been awesome. So continue seeking out mentors. Also, this is such a great program. When I was in college, med school, etc., I was always looking for people who have traveled the road before me. Find someone who is doing what you think you might want to be doing, latch onto them, ask them questions, get experience. The mentorship thing is so important, and then you'll pay it forward another day, just like I'm doing today. So it's a great thing, and I'm really proud of you guys. It's awesome that you're doing this. So if there are questions, yeah, happy to answer.
So yeah, thank you, Dr. Bonati, for your inspirational and educational presentation. So now we'll just move on to the Q&A session. So if you have questions, just leave them in the chat box and I'll just read them out loud, and then Dr. Bonati will be answering them. So just starting from the top, is an internship an extra year of med school?
No, med school is 4 years, And then after you graduate med school, once you get your MD, then you go on to your internship. Your internship is basically year number 1 of your life as a doctor. So you are hired by a hospital and you have a work, a work badge that says Dr. So-and-so. You are no longer in med school, but you are still considered in training. So I hope that that clears it up. It is not part of med school. It is part of your residency training going forward.
All right. The next question is, can dermatologists go into research and start a lab while practicing?
Absolutely. And great question. I did a lot of research during my fellowship and residency training in dermatology. Derm is one of the coolest fields that you can do research in because there is such a wide variety. So I do actually some research in my practice right now. Even though I'm in a private practice, dermatology device companies like lasers and stuff will come to you and say, hey, I've got this new laser and I'm doing a trial to test safety and efficacy, whether it works well or not. And I want you to use it on your patients so that we can study it. So absolutely, there's tons of things going on with research. There's a group you might want to check out. It's called the Dermatology Foundation. And DF, Dermatology Foundation, they do a ton of research about skin cancer. That's a good place to start. Another place, if you're looking, is to go to the American Academy of Dermatology, AAD, American Academy of Dermatology. They have a great website, and they're always, there's tons of research stuff on there that you can learn about. But in short, yes, there is a ton of research going on in dermatology. Yes.
All right, our next question is graduate school similar to med school in terms of focus, structure, competitiveness, etc.? And also, do you need to go to med school to become a psychologist?
Good question. So graduate school is an umbrella term, and there are different types of graduate school. So medical school is one type of graduate school: medical school, law school, business school, or going to a general graduate school where you can focus on something like history or psychology, for example. I would say yes, every level up that you move in the educational hierarchy gets a little bit more structured, a little bit more focused, and a little bit more competitive. So yes, the answer is yes. Psychologists don't go to medical school, but they pursue a degree called a PsyD. I believe it is a 6-year program, which includes a lot of research and whatnot. At the end of it, you get a PhD. That's your degree, a PhD. In the world of mental health, there are psychologists who have what's called a PsyD or a PhD. And then there are also psychiatrists, psychologist, psychiatrist. Psychiatrists do go to med school. They go through all of medical school, and just like I decided to go into dermatology, this person decided to go into psychiatry. The difference between psychology and psychiatry is that one goes to med school and can prescribe medications, whereas the other does not.
All right, the next question is, around how many med schools did you apply to?
Good question. I believe I applied to about 15 medical schools. I applied pretty widely because I was very happy to go anywhere in the country. And I wanted to give myself the best chance. Now, a lot of people will only apply in the region of the country where they live. As a strategy, oftentimes medical schools want to know that you have a connection to the area. So if they're going to offer you a spot in their class, they want to know that you're going to take that spot. So they want to know that you have a connection. So for example, I am from Philadelphia. So I applied to all the schools in Philly, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, New York City, and Boston. Most of my interviews came from that geographic region. Now, I applied to a few other schools that I would have loved to go to in, I don't remember, maybe Chicago, California. And I also applied to Miami because my grandparents live there. So that kind of made sense to me. In the end, I decided I wanted to go somewhere warm and tropical. So I loved being down in Florida for those 4 years of med school and then 1 year of internship. But yes, I applied widely. Now, something to consider also is every application costs money and time. So each application is a fee. And then you also have to remember when you get an interview somewhere, you got to buy a plane ticket and a hotel room and transportation to and from the airport and a suit, a business suit, to go do your interviews. So you have to be realistic about where you're applying and why.
Right. Our next question is, I heard that people drop out of med school because it's too hard or competitive. So how do you know if it's right for you?
That's a good question. I don't know how you would know if it's right for you, besides the fact that you want to be a doctor. If you want to be a doctor, then you should go to medical school. And then I'll take it back to my quote for my final remarks about not looking left and right and staying focused on what's important to you. There's also a funny quote in medicine. Everyone knows this quote. I don't know who started it, but the quote goes, "The person who graduated last in their class of med school, do you know what they call them? A doctor," right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you are the top of the class or the bottom of the class. At the end of the day, you all get your MD. Now, people may drop out for a variety of reasons. I've seen people drop out because there have been relationship problems, maybe with a spouse. Maybe there have been healthcare problems, things like that. If if someone gets sick in the middle of med school. So yes, that can happen, but the process of getting into medical school is very rigorous and very demanding. So if you can handle all of those science courses and take the MCAT and get into med school, my guess is you're going to be just fine.
All right. Our next question is, how can high schoolers be involved with dermatology?
Great question. So for a high school student interested in dermatology, I would recommend finding a local dermatologist in your town and asking them if you can spend a day or a half day shadowing them in the clinic. I have just about a month ago, I had a student do that with me. She happened to be in college, but she did that with me where she came and spent half a day with me, just kind of shadowing and seeing what it was like, seeing the kind of things that we treat, the kind of procedures that we do. So if you have any connection at all, a family friend, a teacher, anyone you know who has a connection to a dermatologist, I would imagine that any derm who you contacted would be happy to host you for half a day so that you can experience it. Another thing is that you can start reading up on different conditions that are common in dermatology. There are dermatology textbooks out there that are great, basic textbooks. You don't need anything really in-depth or detailed because it can get kind of sciencey and a little bit too much. But like for example, a nursing textbook about dermatology would keep things a little bit lighter than maybe a medical school textbook. So definitely get involved by finding a local dermatologist. You can also go again to the American Academy of Dermatology's website. And they have a thing called Find a Dermatologist. So you can put in your zip code and you can find other dermatologists who are involved with that academy. If they are, they're probably academically based and would be happy to share and teach a little bit. There's another group called the American Society for Dermatologic Surgery, ASDS, American Society for Dermatologic Surgery, and they do the same thing where you can put in your zip code and you can find dermatologists all around. They have a lot of education on their website too.
All right. Our next question is it possible to get a job focusing more on the cosmetic side of dermatology?
100%, absolutely. So my practice right now is 50% cosmetics and 50% surgery for the most part. I see rashes and things like that too, but the majority is surgery and cosmetics. You can do as much cosmetic. I mean, that's one of the cool things about derm is you can focus on whatever you want. If you want to be a medical person, a surgical person, or a cosmetic person, or a mix of all the above, that's available to you. So I do a ton of injectable treatments like Botox, fillers, a ton of laser treatments, a lot of different things. And yeah, it's super fun. Cosmetics is great. There's a lot of competition out there because there are people who do cosmetics who are not dermatologists as well. There are med spas, there are estheticians, there's plastic surgeons, there's a lot of people out there, but if you're good at what you do, they'll come to you. So being a doctor being a dermatologist, a skin doctor who has specialized training in cosmetics, that puts you ahead of the game for sure. And most of my patients come to me because they know that I spent an extra year in fellowship training for surgery and cosmetics. So absolutely. And it's a fun part of practice. Yeah.
Our next question is, what do you think of BS/MD programs?
To clarify, the BSMD programs, meaning like a shortened 7-year program.
I assume so.
Okay. They're great. I think they're great. Where I went to the University of Miami, they had a combined 7-year program like that, where you do 3 years of college, of undergrad, where you're doing all those science courses, and then it's guaranteed admission into their medical school. I mean, how cool is that, right? You don't have to take the MCAT, and you're basically just right in, a shoo-in. Now, that's not for everyone. So when I think about my journey, I started out pre-med, but then I wanted to do some music stuff. So for me, that wouldn't have made sense. But if you are gung-ho and you know that you want to do medicine, absolutely, I think it's great. And in fact, like I said, at Miami, they had a program, and there was, gosh, I would say maybe 20 to 30 kids in our class who were from that 7-year program. Yeah.
All right, our next question is, do you recommend starting off pre-med in undergrad?
If you are thinking about medicine, then yes, because it is a long road and you do have to take all these science courses. So the sooner you get started, the better. A lot of the science courses have to be taken in succession. So for example, you can't take chemistry 2 until you've taken chemistry 1, right? So the sooner you get started, the better. But also know, again, you can always change your mind. You can always take, for example, half the courses and then do a postbac program like I did later on if you don't finish all the classes. But if you know that this is what you want to do, or this is top of your mind, go for it. Keep in mind, taking a physics class or a chemistry class is very different in terms of what you're going to learn than doing medicine. And it kind of stinks because you're like, gosh, what does this organic chemistry formula have anything to do with what I'm going to do as a doctor? Half of it is kind of a weeding out process, but you do actually end up using a lot of the science that you learned in medical school. So you just kind of have to push through it, which stinks because it's hard and it's not the most interesting stuff to learn when you're in college, and it's a lot of work. But if you know that's what you want to do, then go for it. Just keep in mind, nothing's written in stone. You can always take a break. You can always come back to it later.
All right, and I think our last question for today, unfortunately, I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, but this is all the time we have, is what is the hardest thing about med school?
The hardest thing about med school. I think one of the more stressful things is that it is a never-ending barrage of tests and exams. As soon as you finish one exam, you got to start studying for the next one. It's exciting and it's kind of cool because once you master one area of the classroom topics, then you get to move on to a next. And by the time you graduate, you have so much knowledge in your brain. You're like a sponge. It's like, what do they say? It's like drinking from a fire hose, right? The amount of information coming at you is constant and really large in volume. So I think for me, one of the hardest things was to let go of trying to be perfect at every single thing and allowing yourself to have time to master something. So maybe maybe when you take a test, by the time the test comes around, I don't know, maybe you get a B-, right? And you're used to getting A's. That can be hard because you're not used to doing poorly in your mind, as you know, maybe you think you could do better, but just kind of knowing that this is a long process and maybe you don't understand something perfectly right then, but down the road, it's all going to meld together and make sense. And it's just a constant battle of, okay, got to study for this test, got to study for that test. It just keeps going on and on and on. And it doesn't stop until your board exams. And then even when you're done your board exams, so as a physician practicing for me, you have to take recertification exams. So after 5 to 10 years, you basically have to prove again that you still have maintained all of your knowledge. So I think one of the hardest parts is that you are just continually being tested over and over and over again. You'll get really good at taking tests, but it can be stressful.
All right, I think that is the end of our Q&A session. So quickly before we end things off, I'm just going to take a quick gallery picture of everybody. So if you feel comfortable, then you can turn your camera on. And then I'll just pass it to Simmer for the closing remarks. And I'll just give everybody like 3 seconds to turn their cameras on if you'd like to. And then I'll count to 3 and I'll take a quick picture. So yes, feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel comfortable. All right, I'm gonna take a picture. So 3, 2, 1. One more, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you so much. So I'm gonna just pass it over to Simmer for the closing remarks.
Thank you guys so much for coming out and listening, and thank you to Dr. Bonati for such an amazing presentation. I feel like we all learned so much and it was so great to hear, and for answering all the questions. Feel free to check our resources out at teenhealth101.org. If you guys have any questions, you guys can also email us at teenhealth101@gmail.com. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you guys so much for coming. And then ambassadors can stay behind for the Q&A for ambassadors, if there are any.
All right, so we'll just do a quick like 5-minute speed round Q&A just because we do want to end this off by 8. So if any ambassadors would like to ask a couple more questions, you can put them in the chat now. Okay, so our first question is, what made you choose derm?
I love derm because I mentioned this a little bit before, but there's a lot of variety. You can specialize in it. You can treat people, really cure people. One of the other things I didn't touch upon is that I didn't really like working in the hospital, actually. I really like the outpatient setting. I like being in an office, clinic setting instead of the kind of sterile environment of the hospital. And derm is outpatient. The work-life balance is amazing. I mean, I work 4 days a week, Tuesday to Friday, and I work from 8 to 4. Like, I have a great schedule, and most doctors don't have that. Derm is what they consider a lifestyle special. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but there are a few different fields out there in medicine that offer such a nice schedule like that. So that's a huge deal for me, but it's fascinating. I love it. It's great. I get to do all the interesting stuff at work, but I still have a life at home. So for me, that was really important.
Our next question is, what kept you motivated to keep going? Were there times where you wanted to give up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a long road, right? So there were times. So another thing to keep in mind is during this process, you're in your 20s. This is a fun time, right? Like, maybe you're single, maybe you're going out, you're having fun, like there's stuff going on, you want to travel, whatever. You're in your 20s and your friends are out there having a great time, and you're sitting in the library and you're like, what am I doing here? So absolutely, there are times when you think, oh, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. I'm about to break. Oh, I've shed tons of tears, as have all of my friends. Everyone has. You have to have a good support system. So whether that's family or a spouse or a really nice boyfriend, girlfriend, a really good group of friends, whatever it is, and you have to lean on each other, because there will be times when you are thinking, this is amazing. I love this. This is the coolest thing. I would not want to do anything else. And of course, there are other times where you're going to be like, this is too much. But that's true of life. That is true of life in general. So I wouldn't let that steer you off the course. You just have to remember everything is temporary. Everything will pass.
All right, our next question is, are there any other specialties you have to contact for certain cases? For example, like neurosurgeons contact?
Yeah, great question. Yes, I work a lot with general surgeons for my melanoma cases. A lot of them, if there's a deep melanoma, I have to refer them to a general surgeon to do a lymph node biopsy, for example. I work a lot with rheumatologists and allergists. So if someone comes in, they're having skin allergies, covered in rashes all the time. I'll work with allergy people and rheumatologists who take care of autoimmune disease, joint pain. Those things kind of all come together. Joint pain, skin disease, very, very commonly related. And I work with other dermatologists because I am a Mohs surgeon, so I do a lot of skin cancer surgery. So other derms will refer their patients to me to take care of their skin cancers. So I would say other derms, rheumatology, allergy, and then I also work with plastic surgery. For example, if I remove a huge skin cancer, like on someone's eye or something, I might refer them to a plastic surgeon to stitch it up rather than doing it myself if it's a little bit beyond my scope. Yes, we work with other doctors all the time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bonati, for having this exclusive ambassador Q&A. So I think we can officially end off the event now. So thank you for everybody for staying behind, and a big, big thank you to you, Dr. Bonati. Your presentation was honestly so inspirational, one of the best we've had so far.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much.
Well, my contact info is there. Feel free to email me anytime. I really am saying the truth. When I had wonderful mentors as I went through my process, that's important too, because you'll see how they are doing things and you're like, okay, I'm going to get there one day. And they will help guide you. So I'm available, and wherever you guys are, I've got derm friends all over the country. So happy to hook anyone up if I can. Keep doing what you guys are doing. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, like Rafia said, it was so inspirational just to have somebody come and talk, and it was so inspiring just to hear your story.
Good. So glad.
And yeah, thank you to all our ambassadors for staying behind. I think that's everything.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Am I signing off now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, guys. Take care.
You too. Bye.